When King Eckley saw that the Slin delegates were now in his hall, before he spoke with them, he let out an immense fart. That was 13,000 years ago, and ever since then, they have never spoken to each other ever again. Insert some music here, because I'm having tech difficulties, but look what we have. Anyway, welcome back, and here we are talking about the spine of the world, or actually known as Krak Therik, because no proud dwarf would ever call it anything but. When we talk about the spine of the world, we are talking about a massive place within the world of Evindale that occupies the eastern coast, or at least the southeastern coast, of the continent of Erenal, which you can see here. Behind me is the continent of Majordal, which is always in development for a future time. But you will notice that there is a slight history to this, at least image-wise. If you look right above my head, you're going to see something, the outline of something that kind of explains how the spine was actually formed. But let's get right into it, go right to the map. Let me just pull this puppy up. The spine itself is actually immense. There is, to my knowledge, there is no one continuous range of mountains or anything like it here on Earth. This is not to say that I tried to create something that was absolutely immense for the sake of making it immense. It just always turned out to be that way. If you take a look at each of the hexes here, each of these hexes is 20 miles, which makes this range of easily anywhere in between, in some of its regions, anywhere between 20 and 100 miles wide. Some mountain ranges are only 15 miles wide. As far as the height of the ranges, geographically speaking, what we are looking at is Mount Elbert, which is the highest mountain in the Rocky Mountains, has a height of 14,440 feet. Broad Peak, which is in Pakistan, China, is 26,414, and of course Everest is capping all of that at 29,000 and change. The highest of these peaks is this one right here. This is Krak Therik. This is King's Mountain, Korsh in Dwarven. It currently stands at about 31,413. But how the hell was the spine created? Who lives there? What is its history? Well, kick back. You're in for a little bit of a ride. A long time ago, when Evindale was first being created, Sithlia, the goddess of the, you can call it a ball of physical reality, enlisted the aid of these primordial dragons, back then known as dragon, or to differentiate from your typical chromatic or metallic dragons in your typical D&D or Pathfinder world. The dragon are immense. Their wingspan is, well, never mind their wingspan. Their wingspan is continents, but they can stride continents themselves. They are immense. To give you an idea of how immense, when one died, I just realized I'm not even showing you anything here. Here we go. Sorry about that. I didn't switch scenes. This is the mountain here, Krak Therik. Actually, let me get out of this mode really quick. And then you'll be able to see the same thing I do. There you go. Sorry about that, guys. This is the mountain that I had been referring to, on which the capital city of Tarasque sits. However, if you take a look at the map behind me, you'll see here, right here. This is the bottom jaw of a dragon. That is the upper tooth of a dragon. This thing fell down and made such an indent that its head, portions of its skull, according to the creation myths that the scholars speak about, because anything was possible back then, and the spine of the neck itself had created the Celatine Sea, which you can see here, which sits east of the spine of the world. But who is it that is there in Krak Therik? What is all of this? Well, the short version is the dwarves, but they weren't always dwarves. You see, way back when Sithlia first created everything, she had gone from the elements to the elementals to the elves, to the fae, to the elves. Some of those elves had traveled all over the place. Some became known as the Mididil, which occupy the sandy deserts of Malek, which you can see here just to the west of the spine. When we talk about the mountains, some of those went into the mountains and started living above and below. Well, those that had learned to occupy natural caverns and everything because tools did not yet exist, they became known as the Slindar. However, there's a history for them, and when we go over the country of Slindaril, the Slindaril, when we go over the that empire or the kingdom, we will get more into their history. But this is about the dwarves. Well, over the course of time, things in the world of Evindale do in fact evolve, and in this case, the dwarves are said to come from the Slin. Now, the interesting thing is there are two kinds of dwarves within Evindale. You have the spine wardens. These are the ones that live in this region right here, all the way from the south, all the way up to the north. And then you have the hill sliders. The hill sliders tend to stick to about this area here in eastern southern Kultrek, which is this company up here to the north. However, you will also find the hill sliders everywhere. It is the hill sliders that are typically appointed as the delegates to the spine, or rather to the rest of the world from the spine. They're the surface dwelling elves, dwarves, and tend to be a little bit more charismatic. They are usually a little bit taller and a little bit less stout than your typical spine warden dwarf, which would be to us your typical D&D or Pathfinder dwarf. It is the hill sliders, however, that they believe that the Slin had turned into, or perhaps it was a mid-deal. But as far as I understand, well, I wrote it, so it's the Slin, those Slin which had learned after the creation of the first tool, or in this case it was a weapon. They learned how to use tools, how to create tools, and with that they then began to burrow into the mountains. Those Slin would eventually become dwarves, according to one theory. To another theory, another race of beings, which was also descended from elves, they came in, they were dwarves. I realize that all throughout this, or at least I hear it in my head, that I am saying elves and dwarves simultaneously, or I'm interchanging them. I apologize. It's actually, when I was a youth, I had read about the Nordic mythologies, and there you have the Alf and the Svartalf, and the Alf or the Ljotalf, the light elves and the dark elves or black elves, and the Svartalf is where Tolkien eventually would create the dwarves from, and ever since then it's been stuck in my mind, so I constantly use them interchangeably, so I apologize. But nonetheless, you had the Slin, which were these outcast elves that ended up burrowing themselves down into the earth, and then would become displaced by their descendants or others known as dwarves. While the Slin were ejected from this mountainous range and whatever shallow homes that they made, and they would eventually go north, those that became known, or would in the future become known as the Spine Wardens, began to dig deeper. This is an amazing feat because they have never, ever stopped. Let's delve right into it and see what an adventuring party today might actually encounter in the spine. This is the first time I have detailed the spine with this much information, so I hope you don't mind it. It's going to be filled up with new dwarven words, but let's get right into it. First off, the spine is just this entire mountain range. It comes in from here. This area here is known as the District of the North. This area here is the District of the King, and this area down here is the District of the Wood. These three districts comprise or make up the spine itself. However, the District of the North is in contention. It is primarily hill sliders who live there, and they all live up on the surface, although some hill sliders also live in the subterranean world. But the government, the new government of Southern Kultrek, they now call themselves a kingdom, formerly of a nomadic tribal people. The kingdom of Southern Kultrek has taken some umbrage with these dwarves that have always lived there, and they claim that they are, that this is their territory. Well, talks are now going on between the spine, who has always claimed that northern range of mountains, and the government of Southern Kultrek. But nonetheless, the hill sliders have no intentions of moving out of this area whatsoever. Well, despite the geopolitical balancing act that they are playing, the political balancing act that they are playing there between the dwarves and the people of Southern Kultrek, it has some fantastic, absolutely fantastic landmarks in here. First off, you'll notice that all throughout the spine you will see these things called laks, L-A-K. Lak means tower in Dwarven, specifically towers that stand atop mountains. Each of those can be considered watchtowers or what have you, but they are also landmarks. For a mountain range that is so wide, it is incredibly easy to get lost in them. At night and during the day, they burned with a bright beacon at the top, magically created from crystals that have been found underneath the mountains, then imbued with magic to glow. You can only see them so as to not be obtrusive to the people of Malek over here. You can only see them with a very inexpensive, it's almost like a spyglass. You'll be able to hold it up and you'll be able to see these beacons, and they will burn exceedingly bright. It is this one here, however, Lac Nordo. Lac Nordo is the northern tower, and it is this one where you will find the release of the latest of the technological advancements of the Hillslider Dwarves. For the Dwarves themselves are really at the cutting edge of technology as far as Evindale goes. These are the ones who have emerging gun technologies such as wheellocks and what have you. But they also have airships, and it is right here at Lac Nordo that the very first airport, if you will, was built. It is built right here in Thorgo Dunnel. Now, Thorgo means blacksmith. So Dunnel is the name of the family that is there, that has been tasked by the government of the Spine, or the king himself, to create everything that is needed for these airships so that the Dwarven Empire can lead the world as far as technology and rake in some major business via trade. Thorgo Dunnel has been there for approximately 500 years, at least that branch of the family has. It goes back quite some time, but in Dwarven years, that's only a couple of generations. But nonetheless, Thorgo Dunnel is well established. It predates this area of what Southern Cultrak is now calling theirs. This entire area here, Lake Duro, this entire area is rich with all sorts of minerals just coming out of this little valley here. This is a once glacial valley, and it has deposited some stuff from the past that the dwarves seem to be very, very interested in. In this, you're going to find an amazing amount of mining expeditions that continue to go down. It's mainly the people of Southern Cultrak that prevent them from digging down very deep, but the Spine has a little secret that not too many people know about, but you will by the end of this. They have a single tunnel that goes from the District of the North all the way through down to the southern tip of the District of the Wood. It's a single massive tunnel. There are tolls, don't get me wrong here. They do want their gold or copper, but nonetheless, there is a single, and they say that there's also a transportation system, which is true. In many places it's just carts or beasts of burden, but there is now a move getting away from the magic phobia, if you will, getting away from that and starting to use magic for transportation systems outside of teleport. Teleport itself can be exceedingly expensive to run on such a massive scale, so they're actually developing a transportation system for this. It's all still fantasy based, so we're still not going to see dwarven subways, but nonetheless. Here at Drot Dragon, Drot is the dwarven word for temple. This is the temple of the dragon, and considering that the Celatine Sea at least was once considered to have been created by the fall of a dragon, it makes sense that they would have built a temple to it. But why would they construct a temple to this, especially on the surface, on the beach of water, of all things? Well, you see, the Spine is, of course, bordering water. The dwarves in Evindale do not have a fear of water, as many other dwarves do, although there's more of a cultural thing of trying to stay away from large bodies of water where there is no stone upon which one can stand. One of the customs is that the water is too deep if 1 foot is not on dry land. So here at Drot Dragon, while it is pretty much on the shores of the Celatine Sea, it is there as an homage to the thing that created the Spine, according to the dwarves. Every now and then there's a pilgrimage from certain religious sects of the dwarves that they will go there, and they will give some some favors, if you will, or some offerings to Hadri or Dragana, the deity that they say overlooks the dragons, or the old primordial dragons. No one's actually heard of that deity for a very long time. There are many other lacks, like I said here, all of these towers, and there's only one other that really, really stands out, and it is this one right here, Lac Forngoth. Within this little valley, between these mountain peaks here, accessible only by coming out of Krak Therik, out of the capital of Tarasque, coming down through here, then you will arrive in Forngoth Cavern. Forngoth Cavern is immense. It is absolutely immense. What resides within it is not connected to any transportation system, to any other tunnel. There's only one way in and one way out. And while the entrance itself is very large, I mean, realistically, it's about 50, 60 feet tall and about 30, 40 feet wide. It faces the north, and so you'd be entering into it heading south through this area. It's really only accessible from Krak Therik. You'd have to come down through the mountain here. There is a small valley here, but trying to get up the rocks to this area or trying to get up the mountain from the shoreline is damn near impossible, unless you're going to use magic. The Forngoth Cavern supposedly has within it the remnants of the old world, and within that is a Slin Temple, one of the first ones that the Slin had built. And the dwarves, there's some debate as to whether or not that the Slin should be given access to it. There's some debate as to whether or not the Slin should even be told about it. Right now, this is a well-kept secret within the spine. They don't want to let too many people know. And it is said that Lac Forngoth here, the Tower of Forngoth, has the ability to detect Slin in the area. How that's possible, that just may be a PR thing, who knows? But that's, if you want to run your campaign in this world, it's up to you to determine whether or not they can, in fact, detect Slindari, or the Slindar. Forngoth Cavern also has within it, this is a fantastic, I'd say, level 15 and above adventure. Daring adventurers, you're looking at spelunking, you're looking at not exactly a dungeon crawl. I would kind of say it's a cavern crawl, but it's more like, I mean, if you have agoraphobia, fear of wide open spaces, then you may not want it, because Forngoth Cavern is immense. And while there are little passageways here and there, it is tremendous. And within that is also said to exist some of the direct descendants of the dragons themselves. And those dragons you don't want to mess with. These are some of the elders, some of the ancient dragons that supposedly live in Lac Forngoth. However, that live in Forngoth Cavern. However, those of Lac Forngoth, some dwarves of this area have said that they've never seen a dragon come in, or go in, or come out of it. Leave that up to you. And if any of my players ever come into this area, well, I guess you're just gonna have to find out. Lac Heron and the rest of the lacs, so the rest of the towers, is really kind of a they're just really kind of watchtowers. Lac Heron overlooks the capital city of Malek Malamahachmadat. It's a pretty cool view, but other than that, there's really nothing special about any of the other lacs other than what I had said. On the outside, on the western side of this, however, Melech and the Spine have reached an agreement that they are permitted to have a small village, a dwarven village that is outside of the Spine, or at least the what is typically considered the Spine, the mountains themselves. In this case, the Flint Market is well known. It's fairly small. There's only maybe 1,200 people in it at max at any given time. Typically, it's around 300 or so, mainly because it's pretty much out of the way of just about everything else. The Flint Market has within it the weapons that are created by the black stone of the Spine itself. This whole region here, I had mentioned in the original Countries video, that this is a unique rock that these spines, that this area of the Spine has been was created from. Well, that rock can be used, and if properly crafted, would operate as a masterwork item right out of the gate. The Flint Market is so called by strangers who come to it because the stone itself is black as flint, or black as a flint in this area anyway. So that's also something else. This is one of the only actual dwarven markets on the surface directly in the spine. There are two other dwarven markets. In fact, there's an area within the Kaldrakal Bazaar, which is some hundreds of miles off to the west at the top of another mountain range. There are definite areas of that market that might as well be called like the Little Spine or what have you, but definitely the Flint Market is the only 100% operated and owned market or village or even town on the surface that is fully run by dwarves. Norgon Valley. Nor is the dwarven word for valley. You'll notice that there's Norgon, and there is, if we come up here to, where is it? It should be right here, in fact. Oh, apparently I didn't put the label in there. My apologies. These two valleys are what break up the various districts. Norgon is the border between the District of the King and for crying out loud, and the District of the Wood. This area here, as we continue going south, here we come into Fangol. Fangol, that I borrowed this directly from Icelandic. That's an ow sound, so Fangol. Fang or fan is the dwarven word for wood. It happens to be also the same word for weak. So there you go. Gaw means chewer, as in a person who is currently chewing food. So Fangor means wood mill. So this is a mill that is on the sea, and here they take the oak of the sea. This is a particular species of tree which only grows in this area here and is actually some of the strongest oak out there. The country of Corfu, which is way out here to the west, is also renowned, unless I have it backwards between that and Agile. One has awesome steel. Agile has steel, and Corfu has this fantastic oak that is extremely hard and very light and fantastic for boats. Well, the best of the dwarven weapons are said to be made with oak of the sea, and it is right here at Fangol Drilon that they harvest that and process it for the rest of the spine. This entire area gets harvested for that. They're actually pretty good at it. It's said that they enlisted some help from the elves in order to find out how to do this land thing and cultivate and not deplete it or deforest it completely. Of course, no dwarf will ever admit to that. There are a couple of other towns and villages here that are missing, but for the most part, that is the surface of the spine. Underneath, you are looking at cities. You are looking at villages and towns. There are air holes and specially constructed passageways to allow for the constant movement of air. There is also some magic in effect. Wind elementals are in there to act as a positive pressure system for creating vacuums here to which air must travel, creating airflow that way as well. Underneath, they do employ monsters of all sorts as well as giants, although the majority of the giants you're going to find beginning with this island directly above my head here. This is the first of the island of Thel, the home of the Tengu, and it is there that you're going to find the giants. Well, in an earlier video, again, the country's video, I talked about that. About Thel really being the home of the giants or being the last home of the giants. Well, that's not really just Thel that has them. The spine, of course, has them. And the dwarves actually have a very good relationship with many of the giants, particularly storm giants, and some hill giants, which are typically not all that good, but nonetheless, there's kind of a truce between them. Don't eat our hill slider cousins, say the spine wardens, and we will allow you to live here. Otherwise, we will simply have to eject you. Stone giants really don't have much say, or the hill giants really don't have much say in the matter, so they say, okay, fine. As we come down here, Laxkera Khan. This is an interesting tower. This one oversees both the Celatine Sea as well as the Jalizic Ocean down here, the Great Jalizic. This particular tower is said to have been the very first tower that was ever built by the Dwarven Empire, or when the dwarves first came here. Its own name means tower on the water, essentially. But Skera Khan has within it a crystal that has been there since its creation, I want to say it's about 2,000 years old or so. And so and because this was the first of the towers, that would put 2000 fairly recent as far as dwarven time goes. Like Skeda Khan has within it a crystal which is able to see sea monsters at vast distances and all the way down, but the dwarves don't really have a reason to be worried about that, or do they? Some of the caverns that they have dug down into have flooded with water, and they have found within that some creatures that came in from the oceans and the seas, so the dwarves do in fact have some underwater issues. And to that effect, there is something else going on within the spine, which is I want to say submariner dwarves, but don't be too surprised if I come up with something like that in the future. The dwarves of the spine are constantly tinkering around with technology, and they want to find out how to do things. But as we continue going south here, there is actually a village here, which I mistakenly left off. You guys are looking at an excerpt of a new world map. I discovered that the program that I use here, it is called Wonder Draft. It is fantastic. It allows for rapid movement or rapid creation of these maps at just eye-crushing resolution. It's fantastic. Like out of the gate, 8192 by 8192, I think is their max. So I'm redoing the entire world map, and the spine is one of the first areas that I have begun to detail. I forgot to bring in a small village here. This is another dwarven village. It's actually a nice little dwarven paradise. You can imagine some dwarves in Hawaiian shirts hanging out on hammocks, looking out on the sea as they stand around drinking coconut juice. Well, this particular village is also the one that monitors the passage of anything that comes in and out of this. This would be the equivalent of like the Straits of Gibraltar in Europe, leading into the Mediterranean Sea. But more importantly, they are keeping their eyes on this range of mountains here. Now, while this is about 20-30 miles across, and down here about 10 miles across, it's pretty big. They are able to see with spyglasses or what have you these mountains. Over here in Drakamor, this whole area, I'm going to get into this in a different video, which is not part of the continent of Evindale per se. There is actually a continental divide that comes through this area. Drakamor has within it some of the most horrific remnants of the past. And the spine's close proximity to Drakamor really is... it really makes them the defense of Erenal against Drakamor and all of the threats that could possibly come from there. Not much of it is detailed in terms of what kind of creatures are there yet. Drakamor, I have very good ideas. The infamous Tarasque lives in Drakamor. If you don't know what that is, look that one up. It's nigh unkillable. And it is because of these types of creatures which live in Drakamor that could come over through that strait right there, that it is said that the dwarves had then created their lock towers, and that's the real reason why they are there, is so they can keep an eye on anything that comes in to Erenal and has to cross through their domain. So these towers may actually have a much larger purpose. If we hone in now to Sedish Tosh, this is the capital, or it's the world-facing capital of the spine. The reality is that each of the districts have their own government, and it is overseen by a single king, but that king is aging, and each of the leaders from each of these districts, including the District of the North to the top there, they are all beginning to vie for power. They all want something having to do with control over the spine. And so political intrigue is starting to really come to the fore within the spine. There has been recently assassinations of the descendants of the king, those that would take over. It is a hereditary title, and taking after some of the other countries which have headed towards democracy, while others head more towards a tyranny style of government, depending upon where you go. Like Dra'anan is just absolute tyrannical. The Slin is a democratic society, despite being filled with horrors. And so there seems to be a cultural shift as well in terms of politics. So as I mentioned in the countries video, if you ever want to run a political game, the spine is right there. You have the district of the king trying to hold on to tradition with the traditional family hierarchy, while down here in the district of the wood, they're coming in with all sorts of new ways of thinking, etc. And a lot of that has to do with the capital city of Tala, which exists over here. It's actually further off the map, called Pundesh. Pundesh, like way out to the west in the city of Avar, the capital of Ivari. Pundesh is a vast city of knowledge, particularly religious knowledge. And they and the district of the woods have a very good trade route. You can see this dotted line coming up this way. This is one of the many trade routes. There are ruins all throughout this area, as well, that had been there from the earlier Mid-Adil, or the desert elves that once lived in this area, and then some of the early humans that came into this area as well. And so not only is it a place of knowledge, it's also a place of history, it's a place of antiquity. You will find some artifacts, not necessarily magical artifacts, but like archaeological artifacts and relics. You'll find a lot of that in this whole area here. You'll also find your typical jungle type of creatures all down through here, and that is one of the reasons why this particular tower is known as Krak Therik. Supposedly they fight off dragons. Well, it's more of an, I think those are the stories that they create because they're so lonely down here. There's really not a lot going on, so we caught a dragon. So sure, okay, so you're Krak Therik. And as far as so history. In the intro of this video, I talked about King Ekli. There was a period of time when the Slin Kingdom had sent a dignitary to the spine in an attempt to make some peace, or at least ostensibly to have some peace. The Dwarves claimed that the Slin had just wanted to spy on the Dwarven technology and find out how they were doing, while the Slin were saying that the Dwarves were holding back technology from the rest of the world, which is rather interesting that the Slin would try to speak on behalf of the rest of the world, considering the rest of the world hates the Slin. There's no real reason for that, but we'll get into that in the other video. When the Slin came over, and the dignitary with an entire entourage of about a dozen Slin, they came into King Ekli's court. This was about, I want to say it's like 12 to 14,000 years ago. This was, King Ekli had, the very first sound he made, he was eating. And he let out a blast of a fart that sent the Slin flying back, according to the Dwarves. According to the Slin, they stood there and withstood the insult, tried to continue the delegation, but Ekli was so far in his cups, he was drunk, that there was simply never going to be any peace between the Slin and the Dwarves. So is there a possibility that the Slin and the Dwarves could make up at some point? Who knows? The rest of the world knows, or at least believes that they know, that the Slin were the first ones who ever make anything. Even the most basic of tools was made first by the Slin, and it was the very first weapon, and hence their name, a pejorative, which means wielder of the coarse blade. It was them who made the first weapon and then killed the god consort Evindale, which then released all the horrific, quote, arcane magic into the world. Again, time for another story later at some other time. However, the Slin have supposedly also been on the forefront of technology, but as far as magic goes. So mechanical tech and even some science tends to belong more to the Dwarves, while alchemy and other things like that tend to belong to the Slin. And again, more information about that when we hit the Slindar video. Other things that you're going to find here within the spine are all sorts of magical components having to do with minerals, of course, and the usual obvious stuff. Anything having to do with minerals you're going to find here. There are some of the more unique trees, more primordial trees, just like the ginkgo tree here is, I think, one of the least evolved of the trees today that's still around. You're going to find much of that here. These are pictures of willows or what have you, and some pines, but even then, some of these trees are going to be exceedingly rare, and they only exist in the spine. So if you have a campaign where you want to send the players out looking for something, they need to cross the mountains to go find this, or they need to hire a boat, which is going to take them through the ocean and then up through the straits and into the Celtine Sea in order to get to some of these. If you want to explore the regions up here and get into some political intrigue between Hillsider dwarves and those of southern Krak, come right in here into the District of the North. If you want to deal with hidden secrets pertaining to mines and certain technologies regarding that, as well as creatures which only exist in the southern Krak area, as well as all of this here is more you're going to find heavy incense and other things here in southern Krak. Nonetheless, it borders the spine, and this area is in political contention, so by all means, throw something in there. Scouting missions, reconnaissance missions, military missions, you're going to find all of that here. As we continue south, you're going to find more having to do with magic, some ancient creatures which come into this area as well. You're going to find the city capital, or the capital city of Tarasque, on top of the mountain, 31,000 feet in the air, above sea level. Tarasque sits, and you can see this from miles in the desert. You can see the glimmering city of gold and white marble that the dwarves had created. In the country's video, I had said that Tarasque seems to be more of a shell. Well, that's to say that it's very difficult to breathe at 31,000 feet without special apparatus, but fortunately magic does allow you to have some protection against the elements, and many of them do. But needless to say, the king will take you there through the gate of Morth Gordon. The gate itself, I'll get into why it's called Morth Gordon in a second, but this is the entry point to Tarasque down the surface, coming in from the desert, from the west, as you can see. The gate of Morth Gordon will lead you up to some stairs, and these stairs climb this entire mountain, and it does take quite some time to get there. There are base camps all throughout, and it is expected that if you are going to visit the king and you want to speak with the king directly, you first have to go in through Tarasque, and then you can go down into the mountain where it's a lot safer and a little bit warmer. Now, as for the Gate of Morth Gordon, the Gate of Morth Gordon, unbeknownst to most of the world, is a joke from the dwarves to the rest of the world. Morth Gordon was a drunken general who, when the Slin at the there was something of an insurrection, the insult of the Slin dignitaries in the story that I told you about. The Slin sent more. Only it wasn't exactly friendly, and this was really before the desert nation of Malek was created. So there were some nomadic people in this area. Certainly, there were the Beta-Deal Elves. We'll get into their history on the Malek video. But it was this particular general that really sent the Slin into a tizzy. A Slin army decided to pay a visit to Tarasque and the king and King Ekli at the time, and they had wanted to deliver a message. And it was not necessarily one of violence, or at least according to the Slin. To the dwarves, of course, they had wanted to sack the entire mountain and just take everything. But nonetheless, when the Slin arrived, it was Morth Gordon that ended up tossing just mugs of the cheapest, crappiest ale at them. Something that had been created not by dwarves, but by someone else. Ale that not even a dwarf would drink. And they ended up soaking the entire Slin army with this stuff. And it was just such an insult that the Slin ended up turning around. Well, according to the Slin, the event did take place. Some of them did get wet, and the ale stunk so bad that they had to find a nearby river. Where in the mountains, or excuse me, where in the desert are you going to find this in which to bathe? And that's the real reason why the Slin went away. Well, if you look directly to the north of this in Pagalnaheran, which is a current trading village belonging to Malek, you'll notice that there's a small oasis there. Well, in that oasis is supposedly where the Slin, they found water, they bathed, and then they came back. And the gate is supposedly one of those, hey, if you screw around with us, we're going to screw back with you. One of those things from the dwarves to the rest of the world. Morth Gordon, of course, being the general who commanded all of this. So the spine or at least the people of the Spine. The dwarves are not necessarily, again, they don't necessarily hate the elves. I mean, after all, there's a high population of Midadil all throughout the desert of Malek, as well as down here in the jungle, in the jungle villages, cities, and towns of Tala. The Hillsiders really have no problems whatsoever with them. They have no problems with the tier folk halflings who live in this area here, as well as here, and all the Hillsiders are in this area. So, well, not all, but a good majority of them are in this area. There's not that, but there is absolutely from dwarves to Slin, and from Slin to dwarves, supposedly because of these. One claims that one is descended from the other one says that they were the first when it comes down to tech and all this other kind of stuff. So that kind of competition has led to some hardships between these two peoples. As far as everything else goes, the Spine does really have a good marketing program, it may seem, or a good marketing department. They really don't let their own politics get out. But the rest of the world begins to feel it as soon as something bad happens in the Spine. And right now, with the government being what it is in Sedish Tosh, and the assassination attempts against the king's kids, and some success against the hereditary descendant, or the heirs to the throne. Things had the cracks in the mountain had begun to show, but Krak Therik, the Spine of the world, still remains strong. It will continue to stand, and where it's going to go from here, I'm going to put that into the atlas. I'll end up putting in the whole history of this region and where it's going to go at the end of the Fourth Age as we come into the Fifth. Over here, I had mentioned in the country video that Loch Thel, the home of the Tengu, they don't have the technology to mine the largest deposits of platinum, and so they have struck a bargain with, or struck a trade deal with the dwarves of the Spine, who do have access to platinum, but not quite like they do in Loch Thel. So the Spine does have direct access and mining jobs in Loch Thel in platinum mines, which is incredible. I'm taking a look at the rest of the notes here. Yeah, the Court of the Underearth is the one that is slowly collapsing. That's one I had mentioned. Morth Gordon, who was the general, of course. That's about it for the Spine. I'm going to turn over to your comments now and see if we have any questions whatsoever. And let's see if we have anything here. Ooh, fancy. Oh, Dave. Oh, I take it you like the video. This is pissing me off. Take a look at this thing. So it's pretty cool, but there is sound to it. I don't know what happened. I can't get the sound to appear. But anyway, no, not the Tarasque. Yes, the Tarasque. The Tarasque is actually over there. It is in Drakamor, but it's you really have to get into Drakamor in order to really see it. There was one party in one particular adventure who had gotten into Drakamor. They saw the Tarasque at a distance, and they were terrified. And I mean, and you know how tall that thing is. So in case you don't know, the Tarasque it's a D&D world, or it's the D20 version of Godzilla. Only this thing you can't kill. It has a giant shell on its back with horns, and it's got horns and spikes. It kind of looks like a standing triceratops, a bipedal triceratops, only without the huge shell behind its head. It's absolutely massive. Just look it up. Tarasque. From what I hear, your players know they will definitely get mauled by dragon at a place that anyone ever whispered the word. Yes, absolutely. Well, no, that's not true. The dragon are so far a part of the past and part of the lore that no one has seen one. And the last recorded appearance of one was Alraxis in Dra-Anan. That was the last one that they saw. And Loch Thel claims to have like a small finger bone, which is several yards long, several meters long, of one of the dragons, their ancestor. So where the dragon now, where the rest of their bodies, we can kind of see how big one was by the formation of the Celtine Sea, but you know, what land dweller can actually appreciate that unless they can get up into space somehow and look down? So some cartographers have noticed it, and they kind of went, So maybe it's just a legend that they created. To me, the dragon absolutely were the world shapers. That's why there are impossible, making up for my lack of knowledge in geology, there are impossibilities here, geographically speaking, and so I can easily say that the dragon had created it. And some of the laws of physics just don't seem to make sense here as far as the placement of mountains go. Let's see. I love that the idea is that beacons only being seen with the spyglass. Yeah, that was a recent addition to the world of Evindale, and specifically as I was developing the map for the spine originally. I really like the notion that there's a navigation system within the mountains themselves. Again, you're looking at something that is 100 miles wide in some places, and this is a vast. I don't even think the Himalayas have that. I don't think that they are constantly. I don't know. You know what? I'm going to have to do some math one day and really take a look at it. But it's immense. And really, it's only this mountain right here. It's only the mountain that Tarasque is on. That is the tallest of the mountains. The tallest volcano, actually the only current volcano that anyone can see. There's a couple old shield volcanoes around here every now and then. You'll see like a little bump in the terrain. That used to be a shield volcano. You know, big bumps, but nonetheless, Mount Vedrshin Mutvia is really the only other mountain that has a real name to it. There are, every peak has a name in Evindale, and we leave it up to you. But you can kind of tell on these maps what the language would sound like. And as these words get developed, I start tossing them up on EvindaleRPG.com in the lexicon area. So eventually, you guys are also going to see some dwarven lexicon there to give you guys some ideas. But yeah, I wanted a way that people would be able to navigate through there with with some kind of a crystal, that you'd be able to see the beacons so that you know exactly where to go, and it's unobtrusive. It also explains why they never were able to, why no one has ever seen them in the past. See? What means of propulsion do the Dwarven airships use? It's engines. It's steam engines, actually. Steam engines that turn props, and they have managed to find a gas. Where they get the gas, that's an entirely different topic. But, actually, no, it is not an entirely different topic because we're talking about the Dwarves. I'm a dumbass. Anyway, so they, up here in the, let me get back to the map here. Up here in this area, the mining operations down here, this is where they are capturing the gas for the airships. They're building the airships in this area here using plant fibers, which are taken from southern Krak. I really like the way this sounds, and that's how it happens. I knew that all along. So we come back to this and see if there's anything else. That's it. So that is the spine. I need you guys to vote, if you don't mind. If you'd like to have an influence in where we're going to go, I need you to vote on the World of Evindale Facebook page. I'll bump the poll so you guys will see it. It may even be in the player community. I believe it's in the player community, called the oh my god, my brain is like off tonight. The tavern that goes around. I can see the sigil, the skull, and the hourglass. Why can't somebody type this thing out? I never remember this stuff. Fortune's End. That's right. In the Fortune's End player community for the World of Evindale, there should be a poll there where you guys can vote for the next video. Poll goes, well, I take all the answers, the one that has the most results on it, by Wednesday, and then I begin working on that map for you. In the meantime, if you are a patron, you will also receive all of these maps, these high-resolution maps, at the $5 level and above. If you want to be a cartography fiend, head on over to patreon.com/Evindale and help us out. That pays for the subscription for a lot of the map-making software, like, this one I just outright purchased, so it helps. It helps. It assists with that. It's also just other pieces of equipment such as microphones, cameras, and just basically sometimes just paper and pens is needed as I begin sketching stuff out. All of these things help. Having like water to drink really helps, because here in our town it stinks, and I work out of the office whenever I'm working on this stuff. So I work out of my own office. So any assistance whatsoever definitely helps with that. It also tells us or tells me that you want to see it. So definitely, please, patreon.com if you like what you see /Evindale, and then you can pitch in. Fortune's End. Thank you, Mira. It's did they harvest the gas from the Fart King? No, they didn't harvest the gas from the Fart King, David. But that's that. Oh, by the way, so one of you, Tara, I believe. So you pointed out that the spine of the world is also mentioned in the Drizzt novels, or something. I know that I think Drizzt was Drizzt part of. Was that also part of Dragonlance? Growing up, I had access to these things. I can't say if when I was 14 or 15 or so, if I was influenced by some of the stuff as it came about. I could tell you, I had never read any of the Dragonlance stuff. I never read anything having to do with Drizzt either. And I know that Drizzt is a drow, but that's about all. And I think it wields two blades. But that's as much as I know about Drizzt. And if the Spine of the World is already a copyrighted name, then my sincerest apologies. I've been doing this since the early 80s, so I will challenge that. So and I have documentation for that. But it's also an artistic community, and I don't think anyone's ever going to come after me for it. I'm kind of like a really low-end player in this game. But nonetheless, if you are uncomfortable with that, you can always call it by its proper name, and that is Krak Therik. Krak, by the way, actually means spine, and Therik means world. So there you go, spine of the world. That's it for this particular video. I hope that you guys liked it. If you have any other questions regarding the spine, please leave it in the comments below. This video will also be uploaded to YouTube, and hopefully I can get the sound of that intro video up and running here in my broadcasting software. Until then, take care, guys, and thank you so much for watching. I now turn the world over to you.